The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Yaron Brook Show on this April 17th. It's a Wednesday. Second day of our new format. So please let me know what you think as we go through the week and into next week, whether you like the new format, don't like the new format. Give me some feedback. I'm not saying I will abide by your feedback, but feedback is always good. And yes, my goal is to constantly improve the show and play around with formats and whatever until we get it optimal. All right, today's show, 2 hours. I've got a hard stop at 4 p.m. East Coast time, so 2 hours. And so please ask questions, support the show in various ways, however way you want to. Silvanos, thank you for that sticker. I know Zach Zion has now become a member of the show, so thank you, Zach. So yeah, please find ways to participate. Talk about in the chat. Like the show. Share the show. Let people on Twitter know that it's going on right now and that they should come over and participate. All of that. So Andrew is on a flight to Chicago and he's listening to YBS. That's pretty amazing. That is streaming on the plane, I take it. That is very cool that capacity is available. Okay, some quick updates, and then we'll run through a bunch of stories in the news, and we'll talk about in the second half, we'll talk about NPR and journalism. Although the first half might bleed into the second half, and we'll see how it all plays out and how we slice it all up. A lot of these stories can be quite challenging. I'll also say this, that I've got some good news stories towards the end of the news section. So those of you who have a very low tolerance for good news and who don't believe in good news and who don't want to hear anything positive about the world, you might want to tune out as we get close to that, because this is going to be really bad good news. I mean, really good news and good news, the kind of good news that, you won't believe. You can't believe because Biden's president, there can't be any good news. So, if Trump was president, you'd be. Anyway, just warning you, good news is coming. All right, Israel, no good news there. Still dithering. I like that word, still dithering. It seems like the choices between going all out and going after Iran or trying to appease and abide by and play into this so-called new coalition, that new allies that Israel has. So it's either Israel doing what's in Israel's best interest on Israel's time, on Israel's ideas, or listening to what the Saudis have to say, and basically adjusting whatever it is that they want to say, that whatever they want to say to the Saudis, the United Emirates, the Dubai, the Jordanians, the Americans, the British, the French. Who else wants to join the coalition? Israel is so eager for love, right? It's so eager to get affirmation from the Arab world that I think to some extent it's willing to sacrifice its own interest in order to get that affirmation. So I think that's what's going on. That, in my view, is what is going on. Some rumors suggest that Israel is going to wait until after Passover to actually attack Iran. That would make it early May. So Passover ends on April 30th in order to give Israeli citizens, residents, respite during the Passover week. I don't know. I have no insight into the dealings on the inside the Israeli cabinet. But that is what I've read in some places. So it's nothing's happening is the bottom line. The rumor is that Israel will respond, but not overwhelming force. It will be more symbolic than anything else. It will represent to Iran, give Iran a sense of what Israel is capable of without fully showing Iran what Israel is capable of. And it will be done on Israel's timing, which might be after Passover, it might be tonight, who knows. And that it will be done with plenty of notice to its new best friends, coalition members, and everybody else. Everybody will know what's happening, except the Iranians. But then again, we're getting all kinds of conflicting information because the reality is that the Israeli government is split on this. There's huge disagreements. There's huge fighting involved inside the cabinet. And all we're getting are people leaking information. So you've got people disagreeing and then leaking various things about it. So in other words, we don't know anything. We don't know anything. All right, what do we know? Well, we do know that Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, is getting ready to propose finally his bills, foreign aid bills. These that based on the fact that he was in Mar-a-Lago on Friday and did a thing with Donald Trump, he has Donald Trump's support. Even though Donald Trump doesn't seem to support any specific one of these bills, he does have his support as maintaining his position as Speaker of the House. Anyway, it appears that he is going to propose four bills. And then, of course, they have to be reconciled with the Senate. So, but anyway, he's going to propose four bills. One supporting Israel, one supporting Taiwan, and one supporting Ukraine. The Ukraine bill will be structured as a loan with a bunch of accountability. The news story has it in quotes. I don't know what that means. Accountability measures. And that one's going to go up online very soon. So you'll be able to read it. We'll be able to read it and figure out what's in there. A fourth bill, supposedly all three of those, Israel, Taiwan, and Ukraine, will go up online. The fourth bill is going to put together a bunch of different scrappy measures. One, force the sale of TikTok. I mean, that is always the top priority, I guess, of our politicians. Let's just get rid of TikTok because of the national security threat of those 1 minute. Anyway, don't even get me started. Anyway, then it's going to involve the sell-off of seized Russian assets. And I'm not sure what then is done with those assets once they're sold off. Maybe that money could then be used to support Ukraine. And maybe that's what they're proposing. We'll see. And then sanctions sanctions on Russia, China, and Iran. All of that together. TikTok, seizing Russian assets and sanctions. That bill will be ready to be posted, I guess, online later today. So late today. All those four bills will move together, so procedurally, they'll move together. They'll be voted in one after the other, I think, at the same time. And then there'll be another bill with the core components of the Republicans' border policy bill. Of course, they had a border policy bill in the Senate, which Republicans killed for no reason other than they don't want to actually solve this problem before the election. They want this to hang over Biden's neck. That bill will be introduced later and separately, and the language of that is not being published, yet. It does look like Johnson will have to get some Democrat help, to get these bills to a vote. There are going to be some procedural votes. These are the kind of votes that say, how do you vote about voting on this thing? And the worry is that enough Republicans will say, no, we don't want to vote on any of these things. We want the status quo, that it will never come to a vote because a lot of these are going to require some Democratic votes. So Johnson is going to require some Democrats to vote on the question of whether to bring these to a vote, which is the procedure bill. If he does, then every one of these, Taiwan will probably be easily bipartisan. Israel, there'll be a lot of Republicans and a lot of Democrats voting against it. So again, it'll be bipartisan. Ukraine, there'll be a lot of Republicans voting against it. Almost all of Democrats will vote for it. And then TikTok, Russian assets, that stuff, I don't know. Probably bipartisan. I don't know who's going to vote against that one, but maybe a few people. Anyway, all of them are going to require Democratic votes in order to get through. So this is not going to be a clear Republicans vote this way, Democrats vote that way, except for the border bill, which will require all the Republicans to vote for in order for it to pass. But then it'll get stuck because it's not going to go anywhere near the Senate. So that bill is a symbolic bill. It's not an actual real bill, right? It's not an actual real bill. All right, so that's where we are. We'll be talking about this. I'll keep you updated on how the vote actually goes. The expectation is that this all will be voted on over the weekend. So over the weekend, we'll get the votes on those bills. Remember, Congress is going on holiday next week. I don't know what holiday, Passover maybe? I have no idea. I think it's Passover next week. So Congress gets Passover off, they get Easter off, they have more vacations than government school teachers. All right. So President Biden. President Biden, another one of these presidents who have, specialize in their economic knowledge. Biden is proposing raising tariffs by, by a significant amount. He's wants to triple them or something. Wants to triple tariffs on, so they'll go to 25%. I think right now they're under 10%. They go to 25% on certain, notice this, certain Chinese steel and aluminum products. Certain Chinese steel and aluminum products the U.S. is probing this. Also, he will announce that the U.S. is going to launch an investigation of China's shipbuilding industry, because that is very big. And then Biden is going to announce all, of course, in Pittsburgh, for no particular political reasons, just he happens to be in Pittsburgh today. Pittsburgh, of course, is the home of U.S. Steel, and it's the home of steel manufacturing. He will also announce that he is opposed to U.S. steel being sold to the Japanese company for maybe national security reasons. Maybe not. Japan is not an enemy. I need to buy the votes of the unions reasons. I need to make sure unions are there. Jay Luther says Alcoa is also in Pittsburgh. Now it turns out that these tariffs on steel and aluminum that coming in from China, you would think these would be everybody's worried about this. This is really bad for the economy. It turns out, and not so much, right? Biden has chosen products and a country that will have basically no impact on the U.S. economy. Why is that? Because we don't import steel and aluminum from China, or very, very, very little. Of the top 10 countries from which we import steel and aluminum, China is not in the top 10. Not in the top 10. Right? So even when Trump, you remember Trump's tariffs? Trump presented the tariffs as if they were against Chinese dumping. But China was not a top 10 importer even back then. Now, the accusation was that they were exporting to Canada and then the Canadians were dumping, or they were exporting to Brazil and the Brazilians were dumping. But that just nonsensical. And of course, what Trump did was put tariffs on steel and aluminum from lots of countries, including many of our allies. And it had nothing to do with China, but you emphasize China, even though they're not a top 10 importer, to pretend that this has to do with national security and, oh, we're going after those Chinese. We hate the Chinese. The Chinese are bad. We'll get to another story about the Chinese in a minute. And we got to get the Chinese. So this is a story. It's not effing the, it's not, this is not, I don't blame the unions for this. This is just theater. This is political theater. Political theater by Biden. It was political theater by Trump. And it's disgusting. It's dishonest. And it's par for the course for our politicians who have zero understanding of economics and believe, unfortunately, maybe correctly, that we're all idiots, that the American public and voters are idiots. It turns out, and I've said this before, but this is not news for today, but that the tariffs that Trump put on aluminum and steel that Biden continued, never did away with, actually reduced U.S. manufacturing investment, output, and employment, reduced employment in manufacturing, and did a lot of harm to the U.S. economy. Multiple studies now have come out documenting this. And of course, the things that we could do to actually improve manufacturing, improve jobs, raise wages, like increasing free trade in the world, maybe even participating in the Pacific trade deal, God forbid that Trump took us out of, maybe initiating immigration reform, permit and licensing reform, maybe really fundamentally relooking at our tax policies. And, as Scott Lincecum says, and don't even get me started on the Jones Act, just simple things that we could do that would have massive, the Jones Act probably, of all the things, little, almost no downside, almost nobody actually loses from it. And the gains are just astronomical. And even that cannot be done. Cannot be done. It really is insane. Biden, of course, out there tripling tariffs. He's going to be a hero. Everybody's excited. To Bloomberg's credit, who a lot of news outlets publish this. This goes to the story we'll talk about later about journalism. This is a good example. A lot of the news stories publish it. Oh, Biden's going to triple tariffs on Chinese aluminum and steel, and they go on about what this is all about and what's going on and all that. And they don't mention that China doesn't really export steel and aluminum to the United States. Bloomberg, to their credit, basically said, this is a non-event. China is an insignificant player in this market. Why get excited about it at all? So journalism, they're supposed to give us the facts. Nope. We don't get the facts even on a simple story like this. Okay. All right, let's do a little free speech issue. You guys know I've talked a lot in the past about the National Conservatives. I've been a huge critic of national conservatism. I have debated maybe the founder of the National Conservative Movement, Yoram Hazony, and we've debated formally at the University of Texas. We've also kind of debated informally on the Lex Friedman show. And I've critiqued the National Conservatives' statement of principles and all that. Anyway, the National Conservatives have regular meetings, both in the United States and in Europe. I think they're a growing movement. I think they are increase in influence and potentially political power with the rise of kind of the rights in Europe, and potentially have a significant influence on a future Trump administration. they're not the most out there of the new right. Certainly the tradcons, the integrationists, the Catholics are much worse than the natcons, but the natcons are really, really, really bad. And, I think that. Anyway, this year, the National Conservatives are holding their conference, are holding actually right now, their conference in Brussels in Europe. So this is the European version. They usually have one in the United States as well. And they have, for example, Nigel Farage speaking there, and they have a bunch of other UK politicians speaking there. And, I don't know how big of a conference. I don't know how many people are participating. I didn't see any data on that. But yesterday, just as I guess Nigel Farage was speaking, the Brussels police showed up. And they announced that they were shutting down the event. They were shutting down the event on an order from the local Socialist Party mayor, Emir Kur, who tweeted that far right is not welcome, and he explained that he banned the conference to ensure public safety. The conference was running along pretty smoothly, pretty quietly. Nothing was going on, nothing unusual. But, the police said, there was fear. They were going to shut down this conference because there was fear that some leftists were going to show up and protest and maybe engage in violence, maybe even engage in violence. Now imagine that. They're willing to silence people based on a fear that maybe some protests would come up and maybe those protesters might become violent. Any specific evidence that any of this has happened? No. How about your First Amendment responsibility? Now, there's no First Amendment in Brussels, but assume this was the U.S. How about your commitment to free speech, which would actually entail the police protecting the neocons from protesters who might use violence? How about the police coming out there and making clear that they will protect the conference from being shut down by a violent protest? That's what it means to protect free speech. It means protecting people from violence, protecting their right to speak from people who might use violence to silence them. That's the point. That's what the police are for. That's what they're there for. No. Because of the fear that maybe something will happen, they're going to shut down the conference instead of actually dealing with the threat. Now, this happens all the time. In the UK, a few months ago, Douglas Murray his event was canceled, where he was going to talk about Israel. The event was canceled out of fear that protesters were going to show up and disrupt the event. So the police shut down the event. I mean, this is turning the First Amendment upside down. The job of the police is not to silence people who have unpopular views. The job of the police is not to shut down events that might cause upset with some people. The job of the police under a regime of free speech is to protect those who have controversial views. It is to protect people from others who might use violence to silence them. Anyway, at the end, the police, I think, felt a little embarrassed by the fact that they really had no case and had no justification of shutting down this event. So instead, they decided that they would stand outside and prevent people from entering the event, entering the hall. Now, this, of course, prevented anybody at the event from leaving because they couldn't come back again. They could leave, but they couldn't come back again. It prevented anybody from coming to the event to see the latest speakers after the police showed up. So it clearly was still a violation of free speech. But at least they didn't shut down the event, and the event continued. At the same time, the NatCons filed a motion with a local court, with the Belgian justice system. And I guess this morning, first thing this morning, the court basically said that the police and the mayor were out of line, that this was in violation of whatever First Amendment for whatever free speech protections exist in the European Union. and they forced the police to walk away and to let the event go on, and the event indeed is going on. According to the court, quote, "No official should have the power to shut down free and peaceful assembly merely because he disagrees with what is being said. How can Brussels claim to be the heart of Europe if its officials only allow one side of the European conversation to be heard?" Okay, that wasn't the court. That was the executive director of, I guess, the ADF International, which is the entity that sued on behalf of the NatCons. NatCon conference included UK parliamentarian Miriam Cates, former UK Housing Secretary Suella Braverman, and a German cardinal, Ludwig Müller, as well as Nigel Farage. Of course, all this did, action by the city mayor, all it did is bolster and give justification to the claims of the National Conservatives that the left is using the state to silence them, that the left is using the state to take over, that they must have this power instead, and that this is so it played into all the worst fears that people have about the European Union, and it played into it, and it's just going to increase support for them, not anything else. It increases support for them because these leftists are indeed nuts, and even though the court ruled against them, the very fact that a mayor thought he had the power to do something like this, suggests that suggests how bad things are in Europe. This is from the court. The court reasoned that, quote, "It does not seem possible to infer from the contested decision that a peace-disturbing effect is attributed to the Congress itself." So where's the disruption? The decision notes the threat to public order seems to be derived purely from the reactions that its organizers might provoke among opponents. Yep, that is all good. Very disturbing in terms of what is, but not surprising. I mean, the European Union has so many, and European countries now have so many of these hate speech laws that it's not difficult for them to shut things down that they don't like. I mean, you can see that. I mean, we talked about that with Tara Smith, about the law in Scotland. Ireland has a very similar law, but mainland Europe generally has a lot of these really, really horrible hate speech laws that are pretty nasty. All right, I don't know if you saw this, but Dubai has been flooded. Heaviest rainfall in 75 years. I don't know how they measure that. Did they measure rainfall 75 years ago? I guess so. Anyway, 75 years, the streets are flooded, the airport is flooded, the city is basically shut down. At least one person has died, but passengers are, at the airport are walking through deep water, and the city streets are just rivers. Cars are abandoned in completely flooded waters all the way to the top. It's a complete disaster in Dubai. They weren't ready for once in every 75-year flooding. So this Dubai, which so many people view as some kind of paradise out there, I'm very, very skeptical, is struggling with this. Now, one explanation for this, interestingly enough, you'd expect everybody to blame climate change on this, but no, the actual blame is not on climate change, but on other man-made activity, that is cloud seeding. Cloud seeding is a practice all over the Middle East. It doesn't almost ever rain in places like Dubai, and in order to have any kind of rain, any kind of precipitation, in order to grow anything, you need to seed the clouds. So they take clouds that normally don't produce rain, and they put a chemical in them, right? And that causes these clouds to actually drop some water. The problem is that it seems like they were seeding clouds that already were likely to produce rain, but now, overproduction, right? It turns out that since the 1950s and 60s, cloud seeding was something that was being done. But anyway, who knows? I don't know what caused this. It could be that they made a mistake with the cloud seeding. Cloud seeding is necessary, again, in this kind of part of the world. So they can't undo it. I guess some of the news stories are blaming climate change, human-caused climate breakdown. Breakdown, not just change. Now it's a breakdown. The climate is breaking down, and the consequence of the breakdown is we'll get massive floods and other extreme events. God, it flooded. Give me a break. Floods happen. Yeah, I know they're not supposed to happen in Dubai because Dubai is this special place. Talking about the Gulf state. Dubai is a part of the United Arab Emirates. Well, Microsoft signed a deal yesterday to invest $1.5 billion in a company called G42, which is the United Arab Emirates' top artificial intelligence company. I mean, I'm not sure about top AI, maybe only AI, but anyway, it's a top AI company. So Microsoft is investing $1.5 billion in this company. And what does Microsoft get for this? The deal offers potential access to the huge wealth of the Emirates. I find this fascinating because it's not much about the actual commercial benefits of Microsoft for investing in G42, but it is access to the Emirati wealth. Guess who the chairman of this company is? The chairman is Sheikh Tahnoun bin Zayed. He happens to be the Emirates' national security advisor. National security advisor, chairman of an AI company, and Microsoft investing $1.5 billion. He also happens to be the younger brother of the country's democratically elected constitutional respect. Oh, no, sorry, wrong country. To the country's ruler, sheikh, emir, right? So the emir is, this is his brother. So a lot of good connections Microsoft is making here. G42, I think you'll be shocked. The G42 is deeply embedded in their Emirati security state. In other words, G42 is embedded in spying on people who go to Dubai on vacation, and people who work in Dubai, and people who live in Dubai, and all the other United Arab Emirates, right? G42 is also focused on biotechnology. It's focused on AI. It's focused on surveillance and using AI for all of this. Several of its executives are also associated with a company called Dark Matter, which is a Emirati cyber intelligence and hacking firm that employs a bunch of former spies. Anyway, this is an interesting company. Why did Microsoft invest $1.5 billion in it? It can't just be because of all these connections. Now, this is going to allow G42 to use Microsoft products, to use Microsoft AI. Microsoft, which is, of course, OpenAI's massive investor, is investing huge in AI. But it's hard to believe that an Emirati, but it's just hard to believe that the Emirati company has that much to offer Microsoft. Indeed, Microsoft is going to give G42 permission to sell Microsoft services that use powerful AI chips, which are used to train and fine-tune generative AI models. In return, G42, which has been under, skip that, will use Microsoft Cloud Services and accede to a security arrangement with the U.S. So the reality is, when you look at this deal, Microsoft has very little to gain from this commercially. There's almost nothing here. It's all about, what do we call it? Cronyism. It's all about power. It's all about connections. It's all about money. It's all about who these people are, what they are doing, and the Microsoft's ability. But more importantly than that, the real motive behind this deal is not Microsoft's interest in the Emirates or G42's importance. The real motive behind this is the Biden administration. This is all about U.S. policy. So G42 was getting very, very close to Chinese. It had Chinese investors. It was forming alliances with Chinese. It has brought in Chinese equipment. And this raised a red flag within the national security apparatus in the United States. They don't want AI companies, particularly not in countries that are supposed to be our allies, working closely with Chinese. They also fear that China putting equipment in companies like this would actually give them access to, secrets, American secrets, as part of this. So it is indeed the government that has approached Microsoft and basically coordinated this deal. Coordinated, that's a nice word. This is about the U.S. government's concerns about, protecting national security, protecting IP that's related to AI, and preserving, most importantly maybe, preserving its influence in the UAE versus growing Chinese influence. China, by the way, has put a bunch of telecommunications equipment in the UAE, so the Chinese can follow everything that's being said and communicated. G42 uses Huawei telecom equipment, and that can be used to hack into American communication systems by the Chinese intelligence agencies that have a back door. There's a lot of stuff here that's murky, but this is basically an attempt by the United States to halt the influence and impact of the Chinese government on, again, what is perceived to be, whether they are or not is a separate question, a perceived to be ally to the United States. This is all supposed to be a win for national security, but what we're actually seeing is, this is bizarre, right? If you really cared about national security, if they really cared about national security and the importance of technology for national security, then wouldn't the number one priority of the United States would be to stop all the, the antitrust lawsuits against big tech, including Microsoft, which is essential for American national security because we need innovation and we need progress and we need growth. And big tech is what generates much of that. Even when they buy smaller companies who are potential competitors, capital flows into those companies that allows for more growth. All right. Warning. We are moving into good news territory. The first good news story is not going to offend you, but the second one, oh my God, you guys are going to go nuts over this good news one. So I'm just warning you because I know how sensitive you are, and I believe in doing warnings just in case of microaggressions for some of my listeners. You are going to get massive Brook derangement syndrome for this one. Not from this one, for the next one. This one is, again, I think pretty tame as compared to the next one. More and more people are using something called Grail, which is a product, a blood test by a company called Gallieri. This is a blood test that actually identifies a cancer. It identifies the proteins that cancer cells tend to emit. This is a particular, this test is particularly useful for silent cancers that don't cause symptoms, or they do cause symptoms only when you're pretty much going to die, when it's too late to do anything about it, like pancreatic cancer, ovarian cancer, and other cancers. This is a blood test. You can get it done today for, I think, something like $800, $900, something like that. They look at 50 different cancers, and they let you know if you are susceptible. One example I just read about is a woman who did the test. She found out that she had a very small tumor. She got positive on the test. Then they did scans to find the cancer. She found she had a very small tumor in her groin, and the diagnosis of a mantle cell lymphoma, which is a rare but very aggressive form of cancer. She was treated, and she's in remission. If they'd waited, she would be dead. So this is amazing technology that's only going to get better. For one, I just got my first one. I used this a few months ago. It's called Grail. The company's called Galleri, Gallery. You should definitely consider doing this. What the blood test does is it identifies, I said proteins, it's probably not proteins, biological substances that are shed by cancers. For example, fragments of a tumor's DNA. And of course, if we can identify cancers early, almost all cancers are pretty well treatable if they're caught early. Indeed, if they're caught early, we could probably reduce the death rates from cancer dramatically. This is, of course, only the first test. There are going to be others. They're going to get better. There's still, of course, the fear risk of false positives. You could get a positive result from the test, and it turns out you don't have cancer. Those do exist. They exist in any test. I think it's worth it. If you can't tolerate a first positive because you'll freak out, don't do it. But they're going to happen. But the value of identifying cancer early and treating it early, I think, far exceeds the risk of the false positive. So highly recommend people use this. There is a phenomenon right now of increased cancers among young people in their 30s and 40s. So if you can afford to do this, even in your 30s and 40s, not a bad idea. It seems like a no-brainer at less than $1,000. Again, if you can afford it, to do this, to make it part of your checkup, your annual checkup, just to be sure. Certainly, I think once you reach the age of 60 or so, again, this should be part of your annual checkup. All right, here's the one that will trigger you guys. By the way, big story about this in the Washington Post today. If you want to find it, you probably need a subscription to the Post, but under innovations, they've got a big story about this test. As I said, I've already used it, and luckily I came out completely negative, but I'm a big fan. All right. So this is from The Economist today. I think it's today. Yep, it's in The Economist today. Economist yesterday, and this is the headline, and I know this is particularly going to surprise some of you young people. It says Gen Z, between right now, I think between 15 and 24. So young adults and late teens, right? Gen Z is unprecedentedly rich. pretty much every other cohort, baby boomers, Gen Xers, and millennials, were not as wealthy as Gen Z is at this age, adjusted for inflation, of course. And the numbers are quite startling because they're completely unexpected. And of course, nobody thinks this is true. All I hear from Gen Zs and millennials, and we'll get to millennials in a minute, all we hear from Gen Zs and millennials is how they're screwed, how they're worse off, how they're going to be worse off than everybody else, how Gen Xers are so much better off, how the baby boomers are so much better off. It turns out, based on now a number of studies looking at this, that it's just not true. It's just not true. This is the generation that, of course, Jonathan Haidt has labeled the anxious generation. This is a generation that is less likely to form relationships than younger generations. They're less likely to have sex than, other generations. Then they're less likely to drink than other generations, and much more likely to be depressed. Much more likely to be depressed than other generations. So a lot of bad stuff going on here. Gen X's, and yet, in terms of wealth and income, it's richer than any other generation in American history. That is, at this age, they're doing better than everybody else. And this is taking into account the cost of housing, which is ridiculous for Gen Zs, and it's taking into account student debt. In other words, it's taking into account the balance sheet, not just the asset, but also the liabilities that Gen Z has. Gen Zs are, working at this point in their life at higher rates than other generations in terms of just the unemployment among them, or the labor participation rate is actually higher than it was at this rate for others. They have benefited from the very tight labor market, so wages among this group has gone up significantly. And this is true not just in the United States. This is true in the US, in Europe, in the UK. Hourly rates are up, significantly, 13% year over year, compared to 6% for workers 25 and 54. So 16 to 24-year-olds seeing their wages rise at a much faster rate than 25 to 54-year-olds. Last year, people 18 to 21 saw average hourly pay in Britain, this is in Britain, rising by 15%, which outstripped pay raises of any other age group. This is true, for example, in New Zealand even, where 20 to 24s increased by 10% compared to an average of 6 for all other age groups. So there's strong wage growth boosted by, which has boosted this generation's income. They've got money, they've got wealth, they have high incomes, and they're doing much better than others. Now, it's true, again, they don't drink, they don't have sex, they don't engage in social activities, they don't, and they're probably going to marry even later than millennials, right? And it turns out, produce fewer innovations. So they're less likely to file a patent than they were in the recent past. So that's worrisome, very worrisome. And they're less likely to be at some of the top of their fields, right? I mean, for example, popular music is usually a young person's field. Gen Zs are not doing very well in that. They're being outpaced by millennials, for example, in that. So not all good news, but from an economic perspective, taking everything into account, including housing and everything else, at this age, nobody's ever done better than Gen Zers have done. And this, again, is both true of income and wealth. There's the strongest aspect of this, probably the thing driving this more than anything else right now, is the fact that unemployment is so low. That is, that they are driving wages up by the very fact that there's a shortage of employees. There's just a shortage in America and in Europe. Even in spite of all the immigration, there's just a shortage of employees right now, particularly given baby boomers retiring, baby boomers leaving their jobs, go semi-retiring, whatever it happens to be. There's just not enough young people filling up all those jobs. This does not have anything to do with minimum wage. Minimum wage would not affect wealth in any kind of significant way. All right, on top of that I was expecting just to talk about that, but then just a few minutes before the show started, so I haven't read this in full detail, Scott Lincecum put out a piece today called Cheer Up Millennials, all you millennials out there, about how millennials are doing, fantastically well. That in spite of all the economic problems, millennials are doing dramatically better than Gen Xers, and dramatically better in terms of wealth and income, and in terms of net wealth, taking into account liabilities, than Gen Xers or baby boomers. Now, first, the bad news. The bad news is housing is very expensive, so it's very difficult for millennials to own their own home. Home ownership is down by age, but part of that is also the fact that people are forming families, creating families, bunching up as families. Anyway, they're having babies a lot later, which makes them eager to buy homes later. So the fact that home ownership is not as high for millennials as it is for other groups, it has to do more with the fact that they form households later, and therefore the urgency of buying a home becomes later, and they'll likely buy a home. So we're likely to see this change over the next 10 years as millennials start getting married, having kids, and buying homes. But it is true that home prices have increased dramatically, and this is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, if you already own a home, the fact that home prices have gone up has increased your wealth significantly. If you don't own a home yet, it's a negative. So it was a positive there. It's a negative in the sense that it's very hard to afford a home, given how high home prices are. So no question that millennials are challenged by home ownership. It is true that millennials have rapidly accelerated home buying in recent years, and particularly from 2016 to 2021, you've seen a significant increase in home buying by millennials. Again, as they start forming households, as they start getting married and having kids and everything else. So, but when it comes to wealth, millennials own stock. Stock market has done very well for them. Those who own homes have done very well for them. Incomes for millennium in real terms have gone up significantly for millennials. So the bottom line is that, and again, multiple studies, not one study, not biased, academic, from think tanks, a bunch of different things. And the reality is that millennials' wealth has increased, particularly in the last few years. And they, at the age of 29 or so forth, if you're a millennial at 29, you're significantly richer than Gen X was at 29, and that baby boomers were at 29. So this idea that kids have a higher whatever than every generation seems to be continuing in America, part of that American dream. Both median and average net worth of Americans aged 35 to 44, this is mostly older millennials, is the highest it has ever been. Again, adjusted for inflation, adjusted for everything. This is true of income as well, income and wealth. So overall, the news is good. If you want to delve into the numbers and the graphs and everything else, then feel free to check out Scott Lincecum's paper. It's up on the Dispatch. It arrived in my email earlier today. It's excellent. Scott Lincecum is one of the best policy economists in my view in the world today. He does some of the best, most valuable work on these kind of things, whether it has to do with income and wealth, or whether it has to do with tariffs and trade policy, or whether it has to do with industrial policy. Really, you should all be following Scott Lincecum. I really do think if you value economic liberty, he's the guy at the front lines actually fighting for this in a significant way. You can get all the data. I mean, I've just given you highlights, but it's all the data and the details and the graphs and all the cool stuff on Scott's blog. Whoa, that took an hour. Wait a minute. That was just the news. All right, I'm going to have to maybe reconfigure this, the way we do the shows. Again, eager to get you guys' input about whether you like these shows and whether you like the mix of topics and how long the news segment is. It's getting longer because I feel like I have more space. So it's getting longer, whether that's good or whether that's bad. Whether you like the second part, which is more delving deeper into a topic, which we're not going to have that much time to do, but we'll do a little bit of, or whether you want to, or how you would like to see it. I'm curious to know from you guys. The best way to articulate that is drop me an email at yaron@yaronbrookshow.com, or a super chat would be another way to do this really nicely. We are way behind on the financial support, though, so please take that into consideration. What did I want to say? Yes, I wanted to remind you of the fact that this show is made possible from listeners like you. Can't do it without the support you guys provide for the show, whether you do it monthly on yaronbrookshow.com/membership, or whether you guys do it on Patreon, or whether you do it here on the Super Chat. The Super Chat is great because you get instant feedback. I get questions. I get the feedback. You get the feedback. We get to interact. So, and you get to shape the direction of the show. I can actually, address issues that are of concern to you. So please consider participating. You can also support the show with a Super Chat without a question, like Wes just did with a $50 sticker. So stickers are great. Wes seems to be here on pretty much every show doing something like this. So thank you to Wes. I would also say that that I have two main sponsors, the Ayn Rand Institute, that is currently encouraging people to sign up for OCON 2024 in Anaheim, California, in the middle of June. I'm going to be there speaking. I think they're going to be an unbelievable cadre of speakers. Please go sign up for OCON for all the reasons, both to educate yourself and to just have fun. By the way, if you want to beat me at poker, here's your opportunity. Please come and beat me at poker. We have a poker tournament. I know some of you have participated in the past. It's always fun. I get to riff on poker and harass you, and you get to take my money, right? In addition, a poker tournament, by the way, is a fundraiser for the Ayn Rand Institute. So, come play poker. And then the second sponsor is Alex Epstein. Alex, of course, is the author of Energy Talking Points and of Alex AI. I encourage you to check the talking points out and maybe sign even up for the premium service of Alex AI. You won't find a better, more rational, more reality-oriented, and most importantly, more human life-oriented perspective, human flourishing-oriented perspective than Alex provides the whole climate change, environmentalism, and energy debate or discussion or propaganda out there. You can sign up for alexepstein.substack.com, alexepstein.substack.com. All right. What I think I'm going to do, given where we are, is I'm going to cover the NPR story, and then I'm just going to take questions. So then we're going to do the questions. I do have a hard stop at 4, so if there are questions I don't get to, then we will just do them tomorrow. But I think I'll be able to get to all of them. I don't think we have to spend a lot of time on NPR, particularly given that I went over time on some of the other news stories. Also, feel free to continue asking questions, particularly if you can do it at the $20, $50 level. I see a lot of $1 to $10 questions, but it would be great if we could get some $20, $50, $100 questions to kind of get us a little closer to our goal. We should be doing at least $250 an hour. So another $250 for this hour would be terrific. So about a week ago, a current NPR public radio, what do you call it? A senior editor? I think senior editor on the business desk, wrote an article for the Free Press that has created a big stir. Now, as you probably know, as you probably guys don't know, but as some of you know, those of you who've been following for a long time, going back to when I lived in California. When I lived in California, when I used to drive, before I got into books on tape and podcasts, I was an avid NPR listener. I listen to NPR pretty much every day. NPR has always, since I've been listening to it, been unbelievably biased leftwards. But I knew that. The bias was kind of obvious, and it was manageable. And what I did find is that NPR covered stories nobody else does, and NPR was interesting. The stories were covered in an interesting way. And I could adjust for the bias, and if something particularly interested me, I would, of course, check out other sources, right? Other sources. So I knew NPR was leftist, but it was far more interesting and far more informative than other biased news sources, certainly on the left and on the right, which I find all of them just not interesting and just not covering news stories that have an interest, right? Have an interest. Anyway, it turns out that since I stopped listening, over the last few years, according to Uri Berliner, who is the author of this piece in the Free Press, the NPR has taken a dramatic shift further left. It was already unbelievably biased. But now it's gone all the way to being committed woke. Now I know this is like Scott and Richard and Abby and all the Brook derangement syndrome people. As Wet Dream, Yaron admits that he listens to and reads leftist media and finds it interesting. Oh my God, everything we thought about Yaron is true. He's just a leftist who's pretending. God, that's pretty pathetic. Anyway, that over the last few years, certainly since BLM, but even before that, but certainly starting during the Trump presidency, NPR has taken a dramatic turn leftward and has become, according to Uri Berliner, who is a Democrat, leftist, always has been, his stories have always been biased leftwards. It has taken a massive turn leftwards. This is, of course, true of the New York Times. Here we go. Scott is going afterwards. Oh, he's New York Times, The Atlantic, The Dispatch, The Bulwark, all of them, center-left publications. Dispatch is center-left. It just shows how ignorant, uninformed, and illiterate some people The Dispatch is center left. That is a new one. Scott Lincecum is center left. I'll have to let Scott know that he's center left. I have to let know Jonah Goldberg is center left. I mean, God, you people are unbelievably stupid and ignorant. And again, the only thing that unites the Dispatch with the Atlantic and New York Times is they hate Donald Trump. And now, Scott, Scott has, revealed himself again as as a brainless Trump supporter, as he always has been, in spite of his pretense of, I support DeSantis. He's a brainless Trump supporter who, if you oppose Trump, you're part of the New York Times. You're the same as the New York Times. There's no difference. Anyway, not talking about, not addressing the comment section. Anyway, so NPR has become really woke, and in particular during BLM, when BLM accused everybody of systemic racism, accused the country of systemic racism. As Berliner says, I mean, this would have been an opportunity to investigate. Is the country really systemic racism? This is good for investigative journalism. This is what you do. Basically, NPR leadership basically came down and said, no, guys, systemic racism is a fact. We need to apologize for it. We need stories that expose it. We need stories that manifest it. We don't need journalism. We don't actually need to look for facts or any counterfacts. Over the years since then, race and identity have become paramount in every aspect of the workplace. I'm reading from this article. This is, by the way, somebody who is part of NPR, still is at NPR. Journalists are required to ask everyone we interviewed their race, gender, and ethnicity. And we have to enter it in a centralized tracking system. This is all new, and this is over the last few years at NPR. A growing DEI staff offered regular meetings imploring us to start talking about race. Monthly dialogues were offered for, quote, women of color and men of color. Non-binary people of color were included too, of course, right? Intersectionality is very important in these things. They got a grant, a $1 million grant from NPR Foundation to cover the expenses associated with all this woke identitarian stuff. These efforts got a huge amount of funding and support from upper management. It also then included employees creating affinity groups and, in a sense, encouraged to create affinity groups around identity. This is the identitarianism that is infecting and destroying, and organizations like NPR, New York Times, and everything, who were always left but are now insane. They included this identitarian groups, MGIPOC. You didn't know there was an MGIPOC, which is a marginalized genders and intersex people of color mentorship program. Me Gen T. This is a latex employees at NPR. NPR Noir. This is black employees at NPR. Southwest Asian and North Africans at NPR. UMA, for Muslims identifying employees. Muslim identifying employees. You don't actually have to be a Muslim to identify as a Muslim, I guess. Women, gender expansive, and transgender people in technology throughout public media. The Jewish heritage and culture at NPR. The NPR Pride, which is just LGBTQIA employees at NPR. Again, to quote from him, all this reflected a broader movement in the culture, a people clustering together based on ideology or characteristic of birth. If, as NPR's internal website suggested, the groups were simply a great way of meeting like-minded colleagues and help new employees feel included, it would have been one thing. But the role and standing of affinity groups, including those outside NPR, were more than that. They became a priority for NPR union and for NPR management. The current contract in a section on DEI requires NPR management to, quote, keep up to date with current language and style guidelines from journalism's affinity groups and to inform employees if language differs from what these groups dictate. In other words, NPR bought into the identitarian agenda 100%. Now, this was published about a week ago. Since then, the author of the article has been on a variety of different media appearances talking about this and explaining all this. NPR also has a new CEO who was hired, I think she was hired at the end of last month. She came to NPR from Wiki, from the organization Wikipedia, and we'll talk about her in a minute. Anyway, NPR is unhappy about this. Here's an employee complaining about NPR in a competing publication, and so he has been suspended. He has been suspended for 5 days. Many NPR employees are saying they will not work with him when he comes back, and that NPR, that NPR is it's going to be interesting to see if he has any future in the organization. But there's been a huge backlash all over social media, all over the press, including in leftist publications. Multiple stories in the New York Times about this, multiple stories elsewhere about this, and how NPR has been completely captured by the most radical, worst elements of the left. It's also the case that, of course, what makes this all much, much worse is the fact that NPR is funded with taxpayer money. That is a small percentage, but still a percentage of the money that goes to fund NPR is provided by government. I mean, one of the things that has most astounded me over the decades is the fact that even when Republicans had the House, the Senate, and the presidency, they did not defund NPR. Even when it was clear years ago that it was tilted to the left, they kept on funding it. They have never actually defunded NPR. And what hold does NPR have on Republican senators and congressmen that makes it possible for a clearly, unequivocally leftist organization to get money from the government when, just on a principle, whether they're biased left or biased right, they shouldn't get a dime from the government and should never have received a dime from the government. And yet, the Trump administration did not defund NPR. The Bush administration did not defund NPR. I assume that NPR was around when the Reagan administration, and they didn't fund. Now, Reagan didn't have a Republican House and Senate. Bush did. Trump did for 2 years, and yet didn't defund it. It's pretty stunning that this did not happen. Also worth adding, it used to be that NPR had a fairly balanced listener base. So in surveys that they did, it was always tilted left in terms of, but there was a significant number of people who consider themselves conservatives who listened to NPR. About 30% of its base listeners were NPR, about 30% were independents, and about 40% were leftists. Democrats. Today, it's less than 20% consider themselves conservatives, and the leftists over 60% now. So the station has also now shifted its attraction. Now, part of that is that people like Ken and Scott and Richard, they can't tolerate hearing somebody who disagrees with them. They would never listen to NPR because, oh my God, who can listen to leftist stuff? They only listen to the echo chamber. They only listen to the people who reaffirm, give them instructions about what to say and what to think, and reaffirm the things that they already think and the things that they already say. But part of it is, as NPR's gone crazy left, I think a lot of sane people have dropped it from the coverage. Now, it turns out the new CEO of NPR is even worse. The new CEO of NPR has, tweeted about Trump being a racist. Tweeted a bunch of woke stuff in her past before she was the CEO. Is about as rabidly left-wing, woke, identitarian as you can get. She is clearly, even though the position of the CEO of NPR is primarily fundraising, there's no question that this is a huge, that they have an impact on the kind of the editorial slant of NPR as well. Maher, who is the new chief executive of NPR, is has clearly come down ideologically on one side. Chris Rufo, who usually does this, who's a conservative, has brought up a bunch of her tweets, which reveal the extent to which she is part of the far, far left. I thought the most interesting thing I saw about her was a TED talk that she gave a while back. And I don't know who this person who's, I guess this is from, I don't know who, Ian Miles Cheng. I don't know who that is. Anyway, this is on Twitter. He put up this TED talk of hers. And in the TED talk, this is before she came on to NPR. Anyway, she did this TED Talks about her experiences as CEO at Wikipedia. And here's a quote, and I think this quote represents everything you need to know about her and about just the state of journalism in the world in which we live. Quote, "Our reverence for the truth might be a distraction. It's getting in the way of finding common ground and getting things done." I'm going to say it again because it's complete nuts, right? It's Ian Miles Chung is a right-wing nutcase. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He posted this. It came up on my feed. The quote is still an accurate quote for the new CEO of NPR. But this is before she became CEO. This is from when she was at Wikipedia. Quote, "Our reverence for the truth might be a distraction that's getting in the way of finding common ground and getting things done." I mean, she sounds exactly like Scott, right? Scott is giving up on the truth because it's a distraction from getting stuff done and finding common ground and building a big umbrella, right? So it doesn't matter if you're left or right. The sentiment is exactly the same. You don't care about the truth. You don't care about reality. You just care about hating the left and forming coalitions and having a big tent. That's the only thing that matters. And that's exactly it. It's getting in the way of finding common ground and getting things done. There's not that big of a difference between the left and the right, it turns out. There isn't. Neither of them respect the truth. That is the fundamental. Here's what we have today. Basically what we're seeing is, the journalism falling apart. Mainstream media, for the most part, has been taken over by the far left. NPR being maybe the latest victim, but New York Times is right there with them, and we shouldn't forget that the Free Press, which is a Barry Weiss publication, is a former New York Times reporter who resigned because the New York Times was going too far left. Mary Arlene says that Uri Berliner has just resigned from NPR, so he resigned today from NPR. I guess my stories were still before his resignation. But it doesn't surprise me because nobody would work for him. So where did he have to go? Maybe he got an offer from Barry Weiss to come and work for the Free Press. So what you're seeing is the mainstream media basically either fall for the crazy left or become completely politicized, like Fox, which is part of the mainstream media, and is basically just a fundraising and advocacy arm for the Republican Party. MSNBC, which is the fundraising arm and the advocacy arm for the Democratic Party, and CNN, which is just a soft MSNBC, but still part of the Democratic Party. Newspapers are basically New York Times, Washington Post. There's almost no newspaper that isn't quite left. But basically, what's always been mainstream media journalism has become and has succumbed to identitarian politics and again right-wing politics, and much of just left-wing or right-wing propaganda. I mean, it's not even journalism. It's very difficult to see a news story on TV or in the press, whether it's Fox or whether it's New York Times, without checking the references, without going and actually reading the quote, without figuring out what's going on. The challenge with this, of course, is that these are the only places that have journalists. There are very few journalists out there who do not work for these large news organizations. And we're talking here about journalists, not about commentators, not about people who use journalism to express their views. We're talking about people who actually go out and find what the news is. Now, we know that all of that is tainted by their own biases, and those biases are significant, they're dramatic. We again see that with NPR, we see that with the New York Times. But what is the alternative? Where are the journalists who are not? How do we actually get news? News, not commentary, not opinion, not conspiracy theories, not made up stuff, but actually news about what is going on in the world. Fox is the worst. It's completely biased. It's a complete vehicle of the Republican Party. You don't get any unbiased. Now, you do have journalism. Fox does send reporters out there. It does provide journalism, but it's tainted. Just like there's no difference between Fox and CNN. The difference is the bias. But they're both biased. So the only alternative we have is to watch a lot of different news. It's to listen to NPR, at least in the old days. I'm not sure if that's valuable anymore. To listen to Fox and to listen to CNN and try to triangulate what you think is actually happening. But it's hard. Journalism is a crucial function in a free society. It is crucially important to know what's actually going on, what the truth is, in spite of NPR's CEO saying it doesn't matter what the truth is, all that matters is finding common ground. No, what matters, the only thing that matters is the truth. That's the job of journalism. It's to discover the truth and report on the truth. But how do we as consumers find that truth? It's becoming harder and harder. I don't think you can do the job without reading the New York Times. I don't think you can do the job without reading more right-wing publications, Fox. I don't think you can do the job without the Wall Street Journal, mainstream media. You've got it. They're the only ones who have journalists. I mean, I'd say the one new development, which I think is very exciting, is the creation of alternative journalism but real journalism. Journalism in a sense of not just commentary, but actually having reporters. I think Barry Weiss has done an unbelievable job at the Free Press in not just having commentary, which is how she started. It basically started out as a place that provided commentary, and it did very, very well. But she expanded. She grew. She grew to add journalists. James O'Keefe doesn't do journalism. God, this is the problem. You guys don't even know what journalism is. And what you're talking about is marginal. It's at the margin. We're talking about the big news stories. What do you know happening in the Gaza Strip? How do you know what's going on in the Gaza Strip? Who do you know it from? Who reports on it? Not James O'Keefe. How do you know what's going on in the U.S. economy? How well or poorly it's doing? How do you know any of these things? Without actual journalists, you don't. If you don't read Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, publications like this, you don't know anything about the economy. All you hear is interpretations of economy by political hacks who have an incentive to promote a particular view. So a lot of kudos go to Free Press for trying to be journalistic. And I would say the same thing about the Dispatch. Again, both of them still have a lot of commentary, but both of them are striving to establish themselves as journalistic enterprises. They're striving to hire actual reporters, to hire actually journalists, and put out the news. And to the extent that they're being successful, and they have been successful, they both, I think, make money, at least I know the Free Press does. To the extent that they've been successful is to that extent, this will encourage others to do the same thing. And, you can start seeing the day where alternative forms of journalism do arise, alternative forms of reporters being funded in different ways and, being compensated in different ways, arise and start providing us with better journalism, better news, better reporting, more objective truth. Truth seekers is what we need in journalists, not people just to tell us, to reinforce what we already think. We need people actually seeking out the truth. Yeah, Adiyaf says that he remembers, he's old enough to remember his dad being enraged by NBC, ABC, and CBS for destroying Barry Goldwater's campaign. Absolutely. I mean, this idea that the news today in some way is more biased, although maybe now with woke it's taken it to a whole new dimension. But the reality is that Ronald Reagan's faced basically NBC, CBS, and ABC. Those were the only channels, and PBS, I guess, and NPR. Those were the only channels, and they were all anti-Goldwater, anti-Nixon, anti-Reagan. It's only in the 80s that talk radio come about, so the conservatives had some voice somewhere in the media. Indeed, there's more variety today of opinion than ever before, less journalism than ever before. More opinion, less journalism. That's the world in which we live today. All right. Let's see. All right. Thanks to all the super chatters. I appreciate it. Let's do Clark, who did $50. Thank you, Clark. Last year, you gave an odd answer to a super chat question about being a nice guy as a life strategy. Is somehow not self-interested. I have found being nice, outgoing, and benevolent has made life far better, and being calculated and standoffish. Okay, so yeah, maybe my answer needs clarification. It depends what you mean by nice guy. I mean, the context of the way the question was asked, and maybe I misread it, but is that nice guy meant compromiser. It meant, in a sense, willing to sacrifice, not standing up for your own interests, not being self-assertive. And I think that is very dangerous. and that you really have to watch out for. And that can be very uninteresting. That is unself-interested, being a pushover, as Jennifer puts it. Right? So, but I absolutely agree with you that for the most part, you should be nice as long as it's not sacrificial. You should be outgoing and benevolent as long as that doesn't involve undermining your own values, undermining your own opinions, and not pursuing your own goals. So yeah, I think I'm a nice guy. It's just a question of how does that niceness manifest itself? Don't be a pushover. Don't sacrifice to get along. Don't dismiss the truth to get along, right? The truth, which is what NPR has abandoned now, officially. Don't dismiss that in order to get along. Be a truth seeker and be self-interested. Pursue your own values, your own ideas. And, so in that sense, don't sacrifice. Be selfish. John has a quote from Dalton from Roadhouse. Quote, "Be nice till it's time to not be nice." I think that's right. I'm benevolent until I discover that that is hurting me. I'm nice until I discover that's undermining me. Now, generally, I'm nice. I'm certainly benevolent. And I'm outgoing, but up to a point. Up to a point. Like I'm not nice to some of these people in the chat. All right, Michael, you know the quote, "The happiest people aren't the takers but the givers"? In reality, the happiest people aren't the givers or the takers but the traders. Yeah, and I would even say, I would add to that. In reality, the happiest people aren't the givers or the takers but the producers and the traders. The producers and the traders. In order to trade, you have to have produced something. And ultimately, what leads to happiness is production. So, in reality, the happiest people are the producers and the traders. Thank you, Michael. Liam, is it possible Iran could send thousands or tens of thousands of missiles and drones that would simply overwhelm the Iron Dome and air forces? I don't know how many they have. Drones, yes, pretty much. But they could send enough to, in a sense, overwhelm the air defense systems that Israel has. This is the advantage of having the U.S. The U.S., by the way, is, as we're speaking, beefing up its air defense systems in the Middle East, really learning from this the crucial nature, the crucial need for good air defense systems. And I think the Pentagon is investing more in these maybe than they have in the past. If they're overwhelmed, then Israel will take a hit. It will take a big hit. And of course, that's the real risk with nuclear weapons, is that you can shoot down 80% or even 90%, but all it takes is one nuclear bomb to fall and you're finished. Here, if some missiles drop, there'll be damage, but it won't be existential damage. This is why it's so important, and has been so important for years, to annihilate Iran's nuclear capabilities and do so at whatever the cost. Eric, Biden's response actions with Iran is so treasonous, traitorous or treasonous, that I have to vote against Biden. Trump, terrible as he is, seems way less dangerous than someone that actively protects and funds the enemies of America. Thoughts? I mean, I get it. I understand that perspective. I still think that Trump wouldn't be acting a lot differently today. I don't think that Trump would unequivocally support an Israeli attack on Iran. I think Trump would be listening very carefully to what the Saudis tell him. I think Trump is as sensitive, if not more sensitive, than Biden is to the Saudis, particularly in an election year. I think Trump would be just as sensitive to that as Biden is, if not more so. I just don't trust Trump. Who knows what he would do? He's completely unpredictable. He could be anti-Israel by the time he gets in, or some point within his administration. He suddenly turned against the Kurds in Turkey, and basically the Kurds were our strongest ally in Iraq, not in Turkey. In Iraq, he basically turned his back on them. I mean, yeah, okay, so on this issue, Biden might be marginally better than Trump. And he moved the embassy, whoopee, let's go celebrate, and forget everything else that Trump stands for, represents, does, says, behaves. He moved the embassy. Okay, he must be a good guy. I'm voting for him. So, Eric, we're talking about choosing between two very big evils. And I still think the long-term Trump is the greater evil. On any particular issue, Trump could be better, but he's not good on pretty much any issue. Andrew, what is the epistemological standard for those who reject objective truth? They assert truths are those just the product of their moral whim. Yes, at the end of the day, it's a product of their whim, not moral, but whim. It's a product of what works, right? So they're pure pragmatists. What she just said, what that quote that I read you actually represents is pure pragmatism. That is, it doesn't matter what the truth is, what matters what works. For her, what works is getting along. This is Trump's view. This is why I said the right and left are not different. This is Trump's view. Truth does not matter. I mean, he basically said this. What matters is if it works. That is a pure pragmatism. That's what they go for. Long-term principled action doesn't matter. Truth doesn't matter as long as it works in the short run. Okay. And, so Trump and the left are the same on this issue. And they don't care about the truth. What's going on is, there is no truth. Your truth is not my truth. So what's important is we have a dialogue. We can somehow find common ground on the truths, unless, of course, you're extreme left, and then I don't want to hear your truth, and we don't want to find a dialogue, or extreme right, and I don't want to hear. So we take everybody in the middle, everybody who's, it depends who's talking, right? And can't we all just get along? Can't we all just compromise with the facts and figure out what's actually going on? So look, Palestinians, Israelis, what's the truth? It's complicated, and you have your truth, and I have my truth. Why don't we just split the difference and we'll just establish a Palestinian state and give them statehood and recognize them. We'll also support Israel, and we'll give them weapons and stuff. And that's the new truth. That's how we all get along. That's the epistemological standard. Of course, it blows up in your face after October 7th, right? It blows up in your face when it doesn't achieve the peace that you expected. But that doesn't prove anything about the past, because principles don't matter. So now you start from that point on and you think about, okay, well, what now can I do to bring us all together to somehow get along to whatever it is that you're trying to achieve? This is pure pragmatism. And it's basically the only epistemology out there, because what theory of epistemology is there? Any theory of epistemology that actually provides truth is being rejected by these people. Right? Michael, the basic idea of the left is that every single person is a malleable widget. Basic premise of the left, basic idea of the left is that every single person is, I don't know if that's right. Because it's worse than that in a sense. I mean, what they want is to turn us all into malleable widgets. They don't think we are. Some of us are superior and they have to knock us down, and some of us are suffering and we have to sacrifice to them. So they want to turn us into malleable widgets. That's what they want to turn us into. Geoffrey, thank you for the sticker. That was his 20th super chat contribution. Thank you. YouTube lets me know about certain milestones in terms of the number of contributions. RDF, thank you for the sticker. Mike, Thank you for the sticker. Enric, and yes, and Jeffrey. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. All right, John. Hey, sorry I missed the Terrence Smith interview. I had a free speech question. Protesters that block streets are violating individual rights, but what actions are appropriate for the victims to take? And he continues, I've seen videos of people moving and sometimes even hitting them. Can something like that be justified if you had a life or death emergency and needed to get by? Absolutely. That is, if the police are not doing their job, if clearly the police are not doing their job, and you have a life or death emergency, then absolutely you have to take things into your own hands. You have no choice. Again, particularly if it's a life or death emergency. I would argue that it's reasonable, if you can do so with minimal force, to clear it out even if it's not a life or death emergency. These people are violating your right. It's just like somebody breaks into your home. What are you supposed to do? Can you use force against them? Yes, you can. It's an emergency. Until the police get there, you have to defend yourself. Here, when the police are clearly not willing to do anything, it's time for individuals to do something about it, and to do something about it as, quickly as they can, right? Quickly as they can. With minimal violence. Minimal violence. By the way, I think I told you this, but my debate with Safadin Amos on the Israeli-Palestinian issue is now available on Robert Breedlove's website. It's already got, 7,000 views, 7, I think. So feel free to watch it. If you can't comment underneath, that would be great. Leave a comment. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you find it interesting. Let me know what you think. I'd be curious. People are talking about Jordan Peterson. Z-Car Racer says, I kicked ass in the debate. Yeah, I think mostly I did. Jordan Peterson, by the way, awful debater. You saw him defending capitalism. That was the worst defense of capitalism against Zizek I've ever seen. He was terrible. And half the time, in other debates, you don't know what he's talking about. All right, JJ Jigbees, Yaron, I'm come home. I managed to catch a flight out of Tel Aviv on Tuesday. Good for you. Your commentary on Saturday helped me get through the night. Thank you. Absolutely. I was glad to be of help. It was. I'm glad you found it valuable. Gail, I agree. Israel has Stockholm syndrome. Yes. I never debated Jordan Peterson, so I was on stage with Jordan, but it was a big panel thing. I didn't think that went well. But I've never debated Jordan Peterson, and it would be tough to debate Jordan Peterson because we don't have epistemologically, we're not on the same place. Much of what he says is meaningless epistemologically. So debating Jordan Peterson, would be interesting. It would be great to be interviewed by Jordan Peterson so that I can get my ideas across, but actually debating him, if it was on capitalism, I could do it. If it was inequality, I could do it pretty easily. But on anything more philosophical, he's so mushy that it's not, it's hard to pin him down. It's hard to grab onto anything because he's such a Platonist. He really is this, a real epistemological Platonist, and that's very difficult. I've done Weinstein. I've debated Eric, not Brett. I've debated Eric. I debated Eric. What's his name? It wasn't a formal debate. It was more of a conversation. But that happened with what's his name? Rubin. We did that in Chicago in front of a live audience. So you can find it. The video's up. It's on my channel. You can just put Yaron Brook, Eric Weinstein, and you can find our discussion. I thought Eric was, interesting in some parts and terrible, terrible, terrible in other parts. Very, almost disgustingly elitist. Michael, Israel still has not attacked Iran or Rafah. What is the damn holdup? You tell me. Fear, conformism, irrationality, disagreements within the government. I don't know. JJ Jigbees. It seems to me that Iran clearly meant to avoid any civilian casualties and that the attack was posturing. No, 48-hour notice, attack in the night when everyone is at home, close to their safe rooms. No, I mean, I absolutely disagree with this. I answered this question yesterday. I think they did want to avoid civilian casualties. I think they wanted to have the upper hand in a sense of not. So they clearly targeted military bases. Hezbollah, of course, doesn't do that at all. But Iran wanted to do that as an official government thing. But they thought they would be able to overwhelm Israel's defense systems. They thought they would be able to cause significant military casualties. They thought they would be able to show that Israel was weak when it comes to missile defenses and the ability of these missiles to come in and actually cause real damage and real harm. So no, this was not just a charade. You saw the missiles above Jerusalem. It's not clear where these were heading, but yes, I think they wanted to hit maybe the Knesset, maybe the Israeli parliament. So they wanted to hit but how accurate are they? Could they have easily hit civilian casualties? So no, I don't think that. But yes, they gave notice not to the U.S. and not to Israel, to Arab countries who then transferred that intelligence on. But they thought they would overwhelm. They thought they could give the notice and still overwhelm the system. Again, as I mentioned yesterday, the Russians do the same thing in terms of the quantity of missiles and drones, and they're very successful with it in Ukraine. And I think Iran thought they would be just as successful in Israel. Mary Aline, China does export steel to Canada, and Canada buys steel from the United States companies. Tariffs make so many products more expensive for buyers in the U.S. Tariffs are unjust and immoral. Absolutely. And by the way, the tariffs that Trump put on and that Biden has not taken off also affected importation from Canada and Brazil and the European Union and a lot of other places. So they had nothing. I mean, the point is that all of these tariffs that Trump and Biden threaten and have imposed have nothing to do with China. They have everything to do with economic ignorance and trying to buy votes. And it seemed tough. Hopper Campbell, truth is always considered hate by those who hate the truth. Sure. Hopper Campbell, does truth always heal? No, truth can open a wound, but truth is always a plus. It always moves you in the positive direction. I would love. I've asked. I think Richard is asking about Eric Weinstein replay. I asked, what's his name? Lex. I asked Lex, who's a friend of Eric's. I asked Lex, a friend of Eric's, to arrange for me and for Eric to do something. Eric's not interested, so. I mean, I would do a thing with Eric anytime. Brett, I'm less interested in. I find him to be blech. But Eric, I would do anytime. I think it would be great. But he's not interested. Would you ever sublet your condo to cover the cost of a long vacation like you're doing this summer? No, and it's not a vacation. I'm not going on vacation this summer. I'll be working throughout my time away from home. But no, I would never sublet my place. My wife would never sublet the place, but that's because I have a lot of stuff in my place, and a lot of it's very valuable, and a lot of it's art and stuff like that, and I have no interest. No interest. Alan Dershowitz said on his podcast, this is Mary Aline, that Biden is the Neville Chamberlain of our time. Comments. Yeah, I mean, he certainly is, but I think they all are. I mean, who is not a Neville Chamberlain of our time? It appears that Netanyahu is. It appears that what's his name, Rishi and Cameron in Britain are, and it appears that, and I haven't heard Donald Trump say anything different. So we live in a culture that is a lot more Neville Chamberlain than Churchill. We just don't have Churchill-like leaders, and the culture doesn't want Churchill-like leaders. We don't have a culture that wants to stand for the truth. We don't have a culture that is willing to go to war in self-defense. We don't have a culture that is willing to actually fight. We have a culture of wimps. We have a culture of people who would sell their soul to the devil just to get along, just so we can get, just so there's no conflict. We have a culture that hates conflict, that despises conflict. Andrew Traeger, why do you think the interests of the consumers are ignored as against producers in the discussion of tariffs? Well, it's not in the interest of producers. It's in the interest of some producers over other producers. It's all theater. So it's theater. So it's a question of what does the theater serve? And so first, if you remember, Trump said, oh, no, the Chinese pay for tariffs. Prices don't go up. Taxes don't go up. You don't pay the tax. You don't pay the tariff. So again, Trump has learned, like many on the left, that if you repeat a lie over and over and over again, if you just say it and say it and say it and say it, then people buy into it. And then the other thing he did was, oh, I'm being tough on China. America first. I'm protecting our interests. Again, lie, 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 lie. So he's not putting one group in front of the other. He's framing it as if he's protecting Americans, all Americans, producers and consumers alike. And he's doing it by lying. He's doing it by being a mercantilist, even though Adam Smith refuted that a long, long time ago, and every decent economist, even semi-decent economist, has understood the benefits of free trade since then, which far, 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 far outpace, far better than that. I disagree with Soul on scarcity. Yeah, so did Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand disagreed with Soul on scarcity. Soul is absolutely, unequivocally wrong. And by the way, almost all economists, 99, even many Austrian economists, view scarcity as the issue. And they're all wrong. They're all wrong. And Ayn Rand is right. Julian Simon is right. Julian Simon, the great economist, is right. They're all wrong. Yeah, and if you think Rand would lose to Soul, you do not have a clue, Ken. Not have a clue. All right, Lone Dissenter, you seem to be shot out of a cannon with this new format. Keep it going. Schedule consistency is super important on YouTube, but put in a couple of breaks. Yaron Brook Network, when? Maybe soon. We'll see. I mean, that's the longer term. That's the longer term challenge is to find other people who can do this all day and they can do shows all day at the right kind of level. But you've already got the equivalent, right? You've got the Ayn Rand Institute doing YouTube shows. You've got ARC UK. I mean, there's a ton of stuff going on. You know, some better, some not as good. You know, but it's all out there. You get to choose. Marilyn, thank you for letting me know. WCZN, thanks for the positive news. All right, so thank you. As you said, this is the new format, and I'm going to keep it going in the new format. I will remind everybody, and we'd have to investigate what exactly is going on. But in order to keep the new format going, we do have to keep the contributions towards the format up to target, which is about $250 an hour. It is it's going to be very, very difficult to keep this going if we can't get $250 an hour on the super chat. But and don't forget to like, share. We did get a lot of views yesterday, so I am encouraged by the fact that the new format, at least the first show, got a lot of views, and we got a lot of financial support. So hopefully we'll get a lot of views on this one. Please share it. Please like it. And please comment on it. If those of you watching it not live, if you like it and you would like to support us financially, you can do an applause, which also allows you to give support through YouTube. Today's show is only just 2 hours. Most of these shows will be close, somewhere between 2 to 3 hours. But today I have some hard stop at 4. We'll be covering news. We'll be covering other issues as well. Richard said, voting with dollars for the new schedule. Thank you, Richard. So that $20 really helps. Thank you, Richard. Appreciate it. Yes, so I will see you guys. The nice thing is, just at 2 o'clock tomorrow. It's just we're going to be steady. We're going to be, other than when I'm traveling, which granted is a lot. It's just going to be $20. It's just going to be 2 p.m. East Coast time every day, except for Monday, and no shows on Saturday and Sunday. Although I might make some exceptions, particularly this month. But thanks, guys. Abu Yin says I should do a 3-hour show and make it about Trump, at least 2/3 of the entire show. Trump's not that interesting. And I basically said everything I want to say about Trump over the last, how many years? I've been talking about Trump since 2015. So it's a little boring. Trump is generally a little boring. So, all right, everybody. I will see you all tomorrow, 2 p.m. Thanks for being on the show. Thanks for supporting it. Thanks to all the super chatters. Thanks to the sponsors. You can check them out below. And, yep, I'll see you soon.